Hey guys, this is Josh Mazzella, your cultural Catholic, coming at you with another week of news. Today I'm just going to jump between international and domestic stories, so let's dive in. Alright, first let's check out what's been happening in Egypt recently. The Associated Press reported on the number of people that have died in the past few months. Quote, at least 26,000 people were killed in violence in the 18 months after the military overthrew Egypt's president in 2013, nearly half of them supporters of the Islamist leader, the head of a state-sanctioned rights group said Sunday. The head of that organization, Mohammed Faik, I may have butchered that name, said that it included 700 policemen and 550 civilians who were killed in the period between June 30th and June 2013 and December 31st, 2014. As the AP reported on the 31st, the human rights group that this guy is the head of, the National Council for Human Rights, it's actually a very toothless organization, meaning it can't really do anything. It can say that things have happened, but it can't really put anything into action. And this is actually part of the entire crackdown on Mohammed Morsi, who was deposed on July 3rd, and it's led to the Muslim Brotherhood being outlawed in Egypt, and it's actually led to a lot of secular protesters being punished harshly for simply protesting, including a lot of secularists who helped topple Morsi in Mubarak in 2011. Now, this was back during the Arab Spring, which started in Tunisia and actually led to a lot of democratization in the Middle East. However, a lot of places like Egypt and Libya are not very democratic anymore, and it's actually very troubling, even though a lot of people thought that the Arab Spring would be a very good thing for the Middle East. And actually, after the Arab Spring, there was some progress, like the ending of torture and lengthy prison detentions before charges were filed and trials were held. But since the military took over under General, who's now President, El-Sisi, they've actually come back into use, and the military has basically let Mubarak-era officials skate past any punishment. And the government says that it's officially using these tactics to deal with terrorists and extremists, especially those affiliated with ISIS. But that doesn't really make sense, since these techniques don't really work, are human rights violations, and actually are being used on secularists and moderates as much as radical right-wing Islamists. That was a downer. So let's go to a lighter story: hacking in the United States. A report from Reuters quotes, a massive breach of U.S. federal computer networks disclosed this week is the latest in a flood of attacks by suspected Chinese hackers aimed at grabbing personal data, industrial secrets, and weapons plans from the government and private computers. Reuters reported this week. And this is really nothing new. China has been has been the likely suspect for hackings this past few years. However, this time about 4 million federal employees, both former and current, had their records compromised. And we haven't really blamed China because of their grab or territory in the South China Sea has started to create tensions, and we don't want to push them any farther than we have to. Cybersecurity firms like IntelliSecure, which is based in Denver, has reported a spike in private sector hacks from actors based in China, and it seems like they're trying to get ahead without actually doing any work. And as an academic, I'm just so jaded by people who don't want to do the work, and they just want to try to get ahead with as little work done as possible. I've always been taught that if you want to get ahead, do the work yourself, and that's what history majors like me are told to do. And I've actually done that. I actually had to do a massive research paper this past winter, and that's really the only way to get ahead. And ultimately, working for something didn't kill me. So it wouldn't really kill China to work on the things that they have to work on to ultimately get ahead. What's even more troubling is that the hacking is increasing on our military networks as, quote, Admiral James Winnefeld, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told a cyber conference at West Point Military Academy last month that U.S. adversaries like China and Russia are rapidly increasing their assaults on military networks, end quote. This has actually led to China introducing a lot of hardware that is based on American technology, stuff that we're basically developing, and that could be a huge problem because we need to be a step ahead of these guys in case we need it for war. Speaking which, I'm kind of afraid that we may end up at war within a few years, and actually a real one. Not these like police actions or undeclared military actions, but kind of like those knockdown, drag-out wars. Anyways, this last hack could help them get a lot more hardware through either passwords or blackmail, so we really are in trouble with this hacking here. Now back to a downer from the international community, the war between Iraq and ISIS. Last month, ISIS used suicide car bombs to take Ramadi in about 3 days. When that happened, the Iraqi Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi, ordered troops into the area, including the Hashid al-Shabi, the Shia militias, saying that Ramadi would be taken back in a matter of days. Instead, they've basically been sealing off the city in preparation for a siege, as the French AFP reported. That may actually be a very bad idea for many different reasons, but I'll go over the two most important. The biggest is since the militias are Shia, and they've been deployed to a Sunni majority area, they could start indiscriminately killing Sunni citizens. This is something they've been accused of doing in the past, and because of sectarian tensions, I actually wouldn't be surprised if they actually are indiscriminately killing Sunnis. The second reason is because ISIS extremists have taken control of the dam in the region. They could use that to their advantage. In the past, they've taken dams and used it and either flooded places to stop military operations or cut off water supplies to Iraqi forces and citizens. This actually could work to their advantage because they don't have as many troops as the Iraqis do. So ultimately, they could use this to demoralize and terrorize the people to their advantage. So just like the rest of the war that Iraq is facing with ISIS in this region, Ramadi will end up being like the war itself, a long slog to the end. And I actually don't think there's going to be any positive end in sight. Again, I've said this before, Iraq isn't really a country. It should be split up and they should create 3 countries, a Kurdish country in the north, Shia country in the south, and a Sunni country in the center, and just be done with it. Our invasion helped destabilize the country, and ultimately this is not going to end well for anyone involved. Now back to the U.S. for a little bit of a laugh. Carly Fiorina's candidacy for Republican nominee for president. CNN Money interviewed Meg Whitman, the current CEO of Hewlett-Packard, which Fiorina was CEO for about a decade ago, saying, quote, the article said, quote, Fiorina, a long shot 2016 presidential candidate for the Republican Party, has been sharply criticized for the job she did running Hewlett-Packard last decade. As HP CEO at the time, she presided over a plunging stock price and the layoff of about 30,000 workers. Whitman, a fellow Republican who as current HP CEO has also cut tens of thousands of jobs, is now defending her predecessor. She basically said that, like she is, Fiorina has been trying to make HP better, but when you get asked to leave because of plunging stock prices, for being possibly and firing as many workers as she did, it doesn't really look good for her. Whitman, besides being possibly a failing CEO, just like Fiorina, is a lot more like Fiorina in that she failed to get political office and she lost to current Governor Jerry Brown in the 2010 elections. However, in defending Fiorina, Whitman forgot to mention that the grandson of the founder of HP, Jason Burnett, said that she ruined a great company and that he doesn't want her to ruin a great country. She also caused shareholders to lose a ton of money and riled up people with the merger with Compaq. And Whitman says that because of that merger, it required her to fire 30,000 people. If you have to fire 30,000 people for a merger, that actually did merge. If you have to fire 30,000 people because of a merger, the merger probably wasn't to anyone's advantage. And actually, Whitman has fired in a much shorter amount of time, I think, 55,000 people. That is not good for the American economy, because if you cut jobs, that means there are more people who aren't putting money into the system. And if you want to say that you're making the company better, you have to grow the company by adding more products, by adding more research, by adding more employees, instead of cutting the number of people you are paying to work for you. Now, paying people to work for you does cost money, but in the long run, that actually will make you more money, because there will be more people working for you to make more money for the company. Now back to the international, and since I pride myself on my Catholic identity, I mean, I've named the show The Cultural Catholic, it would be no show would be complete without a mention of Catholicism in some way. Today, Pope Francis visited Bosnia, or Bosnia-Herzegovina, however you want to say it, calling on this religiously diverse country to use that diversity to create peace. The Wall Street Journal reported that, quote, "My brothers and sisters, you don't have the right to forget your memory," Pope Francis told the congregation afterward, urging them to preserve their memory of suffering, not to avenge yourselves, but to make peace. Bosnia-Herzegovina was a country that about 20 years ago had a massive civil war when Yugoslavia broke up about 20 years ago. And much of the fighting was between the Muslim Bosnians and the Serbian Orthodox, the Orthodox Serbians. And actually the biggest tragedy in that civil war was the massacre at Srebrenica in July 1995, and that left about 8,000 Muslims dead. While in Sarajevo, the Pope called, which is the capital city of Bosnia-Herzegovina, was visited. The last time it was visited by a Pope was in 1994 with John Paul II. He called it the Jerusalem of Europe because of the religious diversity and the proximity between the different houses of prayer from the three different traditions: Eastern Orthodox, Islam, and Catholicism. And Catholicism is actually practiced almost exclusively by the ethnic Croats there. When he got to Bosnia, he was met by the current Croat presidency representative. I'm probably going to butcher this name, Dragan Kovic. Kovic. And Bosnia is actually, its executive branch is a council made up of 3 members, each representing the 3 major ethnic religious groups in the country. And then Pope Francis went to the presidential palace to give the speech about unity, which I just mentioned. And then he went to a stadium to give Mass. And even though at the end of his visit he kind of talked about some things I don't agree with, because I'm a cultural Catholic, I don't agree with all the dogma. I actually really like this guy because he's being much more open about a lot of issues, and he's actually being a pope of the people, kind of like John Paul II was, although taking it to another level. And he's definitely much more liberal and open to new ideas than the last guy was. And I'm really glad he didn't die as pope, because I don't know how long this Benedict XVI was going to last. So I'm really happy that we have this new guy. And finally, we are going to come back to the United States and start talking about the Duggars. Now, a lot of people have been talking about the Duggars, which is important because a couple of weeks ago it was leaked that the oldest Duggar child, Josh, reportedly molested 4 of his sisters and a babysitter just over 10 years ago. Now, before I get any further into this, I just want to say I do think that Josh Duggar should have had this should have been brought to light a lot sooner. By a lot sooner, I mean while he was a child, and when this happened, they said he came to them 3 times about the touching, but they did nothing. So ultimately, when he turned 18, it was sealed, and since juvenile records are by law supposed to be sealed and never opened, I do not support the fact that it was leaked, but still it has brought out the reasonable amount of outrage. The Duggars are the family that's famous for having 19 kids, and their show on TLC, 19 Kids and Counting. They're also known for being members of the Quiverful movement. It's a movement that believes that God wants them to have as many children as God wants them to, and the whole idea behind that is they believe that in future generations of their family, they'll be able to take back the United States and turn it back to traditional values, things like anti-abortion legislation, rolling back same-sex marriage rulings, probably making Christianity part of public school curriculum, things like that. Josh used to be a lobbyist for the Family Research Council. He resigned his post after this was leaked, and the Family Research Council is identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group, specifically a hate group against the LGBT community. This past week, Megyn Kelly of Fox News interviewed Jim Bob Duggar and Michelle Duggar, and then 2 of his sister victims, Jill and Jessa, who are both married and both have had or are about to have children. I'll have links to the interviews in the description below. I would have to say that the interviews were decent. They were part pandering to the people she was interviewing and part hard-hitting. And I philosophically disagree with Megyn Kelly on most things. Of the 2 interviews, Michelle and Jim Bob's was the hardest to watch at points, mostly because Jim Bob was basically okaying everything Michelle said, and Michelle didn't really have a voice of her own or a will of her own in the interviews, which I kind of find sad. But the Quiverful movement basically says that the men are in charge because of the biblical mandate, and the women are very subservient. Both interviews, they kind of said that it was an agenda that led to these records being divulged, especially when Megyn Kelly brought up the how Michelle Duggar was part of a robocall that was going against a measure that would help transgender individuals be more comfortable by letting them use the bathrooms that they identify, of the gender that they identify with. Basically, the entire interviews, both groups of Duggars, they did a lot of deflecting, and I have a Salon article in the description on some of the exchange between Kelly and the Duggar girls. I think you guys should watch these interviews. They're actually really good interviews for Fox News, and I think that it will really shed some light on who these people actually really are, even though we've been led to believe that they're just like us. I'm Josh Mazzella, your cultural Catholic, and I am signing off.